Alright, A-level physics is hard, but that doesn't mean that you can't get an A star, and if you do really want one, you come to the right place. I've already made a video on how to get an A star in A-level maths, which will probably be useful because you're doing A-level physics, and a more general A-level advice video. I'll link both in the description, but in this video, I'm going to give you guys 7 physics-specific tips. So in sixth form, I vividly remember being a little behind in physics, just because I didn't really study. I left it really late. I did the bare minimum in homeworks, I wouldn't study much for topic tests. I ended up not getting an A star in a mock like 2 months before the actual A level, and that's when I decided that I'm really gonna lock in now. And that's why I know if you start studying properly with a plan from right now, you can 100% get the grade that you want, because it's never too late to start studying for your exam. But given that your exams are in around a month, let's not waste any time and get right into the tips. Alright, tip number 1. A-level physics is literally like 50%, if not more, just maths. You're going to be faced with a 5-mark, just basically a maths question, and if you don't know how to do the calculations, that's a lot of marks that you're going to be missing out on. Make sure you know exactly what every formula does and when to use them, so that you don't end up getting cooked by, in my opinion, some of the easiest marks that you can pick up in the paper. You basically just practice this by spamming practice questions. As you do more and more past papers, you'll find out that the calculations can get pretty repetitive, but sometimes they'll just paint a completely different context for a question, so just be aware of that. Isaac physics is also really good too, if the questions in the papers are getting a little boring and you want a bit more of a challenge. Tip number 2 is to just straight up memorize certain definitions and explanations. Again, when you start completing more and more past papers, you end up finding that when you look at the mark schemes for some explanation questions, that they're actually very similar. They're never going to be completely identical. There's often going to be like 1 or 2 marks that need you to link the knowledge that you just stated to the actual context of the problem. But if you just memorize some of those other marks that are basically the same in every variation of that question, you're just guaranteeing yourself some really easy marks. Like, this is just an example, but if you see a question about like threshold frequency or something, you basically know there's going to be 1 or 2 marks for an explanation or description that at least mentions work function in some way. Or a more simple example, more for AS, would be something like, if they ask anything to do with efficiency, you're gonna have to mention the words total energy and useful energy, put them all on a flashcard or put them all in a cheat sheet, whichever method works best for you. Honestly, it might be a little too late for flashcards unless you're being really picky about what you're putting in your flashcard bank. But just find a way to memorize them, because it would be a waste to just throw away marks like that. Alright, tip number 3 is basically a contradiction to tip number 2, but not really. Hear me out. Physics is tough because it needs you to actually understand the concepts really well. While there are some repetitive questions that you can take advantage of, you can't just memorize your way through everything. I really don't want to keep saying it, but it really is the only way. You can only get better by solving more and more problems, given that you've actually gone through the content and the basic concepts beforehand. Also, if you feel like even though you've gone through a topic by watching the videos and reading the textbook, or listening to your teacher explain it, but you're still not 100% sure on the actual content, then I still think that's the perfect position to be in to solve more and more practice problems. I made this mistake and I don't want you to, and that is waiting for the perfect time to start doing practice questions. Only once you think you have all of the knowledge. Just start. The earlier you start solving problems, the better. Tip number 4. Master the basic topics first. Reason number 105 of why physics is such a difficult subject is that the harder topics, especially in like year 2 physics, all build up on top of the foundational topics in year 1. So if you want to be able to solve questions about fields or photoelectricity really well, they assume that you have a really solid foundation of like electricity and mechanics. Never neglect those topics from AS that you feel like you're done with. I'm pretty sure most of you will have an entire paper on those year 1 topics anyway, but just to let you know, that knowledge is still really important for paper 2, at least for AQA. I don't know what the setup is for other exam boards. If your knowledge on the basic topics is lacking, don't be surprised if you can't solve the really tricky topics from year 2. Tip number 5. Try and really understand where some equations come from. A lot of bullet points in the specification, you've probably noticed, are about knowing the derivation for some formula. And sometimes they can be pretty useful, particularly in those 3+ mark describe or explain questions. Save My Exams does them really well. They have really good visual representations that tell you where some of the formulae in the formula book come from. So use them, and definitely don't ignore that derivation point in the spec. For example, I remember a pretty good explanation on Save My Exams about where some of the relationships in PV equals nRT come from, and I felt like I literally had like a photographic memory of that picture in the exam, and I felt like it helped me in a really long explain question about collisions in gas particles. Tip number 6. This one's more of an exam tip, and it's to keep the formula book open all the time during the exam. I just felt like personally, when I was really lost on a question, especially a calculation question, I would just start staring at the formula book for a bit. And sometimes, not all the time, that would be enough to make something click and for me to go, this is the formula I need to use, or I'm going to need to use this relationship in this explain question or something. Don't make it mean that you need to rely on the formula book completely all the time. Some really common equations should be basically second nature and drilled into your head. But if you're really stuck on a question, there's a chance that something in the formula book is going to give you at least a little bit of a hint as to what you need to do. Tip number 7, another exam tip, is to never panic. So when I sat physics paper 2, I sat in that exam and thought to myself, there is a chance I might get like 50% in this exam. AQA 2024 Physics Paper 2 was known to be one of the most ridiculously difficult exams. But I remember being told that no matter how difficult you find an exam paper, you still need to give it your best shot, because everyone else is just going to find it tricky as well. You're going to regret it even more if you get your mark and think, I actually could have done a lot better if I hadn't given up, because you've seen everyone else's marks and you understand that everyone found it difficult. If you see a hard question that's taking you too long, skip it and focus on all the questions you can pick up marks from. Literally strategize your exam technique as much as possible. Don't get too caught up on one long question. Try and maximize the number of marks you're getting for every unit of time you spend. Then you can go back and attempt the harder questions. Definitely try and come back to those questions at the end of the exam as well, because no matter how hard they are, even though you might lose all confidence on the first go at seeing it, there's some times where a second look after a little while can make you think you actually know what to do now. And I'm just going to give a bonus tip too, which is that there's a chance you didn't actually need to watch this video. Hopefully the tips helped, but at the end of the day, you know exactly what you need to do. It's likely you just watched this video because you want to feel like you're studying, but trust me, nothing is going to get the job done for you, other than the grind set of just sitting at your desk and going through as many practice problems as possible. That's the thing that's going to make the biggest difference, obviously. And I say obviously because you probably knew that already. So go ahead and close YouTube now, go into a deep workflow and solve as many problems as you can until you just don't want to see it anymore and it's easy for you. For now, I have one more video planned in this A-level series video, and that's for A-level chemistry. So if you think that's going to help, make sure to subscribe and leave suggestions of any other videos that you guys want to see. Drop a like too. Hopefully this helped, and I'll see you guys in the next video.